The chamber was designed to make visitors feel small. Its ceiling arched far beyond human scale, layered with slow-moving bands of alien light that shifted color in response to thought and status. Commander Elias Vorn walked through it without altering his pace. His boots echoed once, then again, steady and unhurried, each step measured as if the room had been built for him rather than against him. Across the chamber waited the representatives of the coalition, tall, slender figures arranged in a semicircle, their posture relaxed in the way predators rested when prey had already been cornered. At the center stood Threxel, the coalition's primary mind reader, his elongated skull marked with faint bioluminescent veins that pulsed softly as he observed the approaching human. Threxel had scanned thousands of species. He had unraveled liars, exposed assassins, and reduced warmongers to sobbing wrecks with a single glance into their thoughts. This meeting, by comparison, was expected to be routine. Humanity had survived long enough to be noticed. That alone was mildly interesting. But survival did not imply significance. Vorn stopped at the indicated mark etched into the floor, hands clasped behind his back. His face revealed little, no fear, no defiance, only the disciplined neutrality of a man trained to control what others saw. He did not bow. He did not challenge. He simply waited. Threxel tilted his head, studying him. The human commander's mind should have been loud by now. Most species radiated emotional noise under scrutiny: anxiety, pride, suppressed hostility. From Vorn, Threxel sensed order. Not emptiness, but something arranged with deliberate care, like a room where every object had been placed for a reason. "You are the one designated to speak for your species," Threxel said, his voice resonating directly inside the chamber and within Vorn's skull. "I am," Vorn replied. His tone was even, carrying neither reverence nor resistance. "I've been authorized to answer all questions relevant to this evaluation." The coalition observers exchanged subtle signals. Authorized. Prepared. The human knew what this was. Threxel's interest sharpened. "You understand that deception is impossible here." Vorn met the alien's gaze without hesitation. "I understand that you believe that." A ripple of irritation moved through the semicircle. The response was technically respectful, yet it carried an edge, one that suggested confidence rather than ignorance. Threxel felt it too, and found it unexpected. "Your species has been classified as emotionally volatile," Threxel continued. "Internally divided. Historically violent. Such traits often result in mental disarray." "History can teach discipline," Vorn said, "if the lessons are painful enough." Threxel paused. That answer had not been defensive. It had been factual. He reached outward with his senses, brushing the perimeter of Vorn's consciousness. The surface was calm, but not shallow. There were thoughts there, present, active, but arranged behind barriers that felt neither instinctive nor natural. They were constructed. This was new. "You are unusually composed," Threxel observed. "Do you believe composure will alter the outcome of this assessment?" "No," Vorn replied. "I believe accuracy will." The alien mind reader's bioluminescent veins brightened slightly. Accuracy was his domain. The suggestion that a human might have a vested interest in it was curious. Around them, the chamber waited. The coalition had not brought weapons. They had not needed to. Their power had always been knowledge, knowing an enemy's intent before it could be acted upon, knowing fear before it could be hidden. Threxel extended his senses further, testing. He felt resistance, not a wall but a kind of structured pressure, like currents redirecting water rather than blocking it. Vorn's mind was not rejecting him. It was accommodating him, guiding him toward what it was willing to show. "You are aware that I will see everything," Threxel said, probing for uncertainty. Vorn's expression did not change. "You will see what matters." That finally gave Threxel pause. Species that feared the skin begged, blustered, or broke. Species that believed themselves superior postured and failed. None had ever suggested selectivity, not with this calm, not with this certainty. The coalition observers leaned forward almost imperceptibly. Something in the air had shifted. The human commander was no longer merely being evaluated, he was participating. Threxel considered withdrawing, recalibrating, consulting the council. The impulse surprised him. He had never hesitated before a scan. Yet some instinct, old, cautious, and rarely used, whispered that this mind was not unguarded out of ignorance. "You may proceed," Vorn said, as if sensing the hesitation. "We did not come here to hide." The words carried no bravado. They carried finality. Threxel straightened, pride reasserting itself. Whatever humanity was, it was still a younger species, still bound by biology and emotion. No mind could truly prepare for a full telepathic immersion. Not against him. He focused, drawing in the chamber's ambient energy, letting his consciousness sharpen to a fine edge. The bioluminescent veins along his skull flared brightly now, casting long shadows across the polished floor. "As you wish, Commander Vorn," Threxel said. "I will look." He reached fully into the human mind. And for the first time in his long service to the Coalition, Threxel felt something he could not immediately name, an abrupt stillness, as though the universe itself had drawn a breath and was waiting to see what would happen next. Threxel's consciousness dove into the currents of Vorn's mind, expecting to skim surfaces, encounter instinctual reactions, and glimpse the scattered fears common to all species. What he found instead was structure. Layers of mental architecture stretched farther than his senses could immediately comprehend. Compartments of memory, corridors of calculation, chambers of restraint. It was as though the human mind had been constructed like a fortress, each thought placed deliberately, each memory organized with almost obsessive precision. The first wave that struck Threxel was history, not the sanitized, generalized accounts that species often carried, but vivid recollections of humanity's worst days. Cities reduced to rubble, oceans poisoned, forests burned. Every catastrophe was catalogued with exactitude, dates, locations, consequences. And yet, the human mind carried these horrors without chaos. They were lessons stored to prevent repetition. Vorn had lived them, perhaps not personally, but as a steward of their collective memory. Threxel felt a pang of unease. Intelligence alone had rarely manifested with such calculated restraint. Deeper layers revealed strategy. Humans had anticipated threats beyond their own comprehension, contingency plans for every conceivable interaction with alien civilizations. Vorn's mind showed simulations of conflicts, alliances, betrayals, and rescues, each scenario weighed against morality, survival, and consequence. It was not just preparation, it was foresight sculpted by experience and discipline. The alien had assumed superiority. He had assumed humans would be impulsive, ruled by emotion. That assumption now trembled like a leaf in a storm. Then came the emotions. They were present, unmistakable, yet disciplined. Anger was contained in precise channels, like a weapon kept in perfect condition, ready for deployment. Fear was acknowledged and catalogued, never allowed to cloud judgment. And pride. Oh, pride. But not the arrogance that had been expected. This was quiet, internal, the kind that allowed a species to survive everything it had done to itself and still move forward with measured purpose. Threxel followed the threads of these emotions, curious how they intertwined with thought. Here was a human who understood violence intimately, who had seen its cost and chosen restraint. He understood suffering, loss, and betrayal, and yet wielded control like a sharpened edge. And here, at the center of it all, was Vorn, guiding the experience. Every memory the alien encountered seemed to be filtered through intention. Vorn was not merely being scanned, he was showing what he wanted the Coalition to see. The next layer struck deeper still. Threxel found glimpses of the human species' collective consciousness, debates, councils, engineers, soldiers, thinkers, and ordinary citizens all contributing to survival. He felt not chaos, but unity born of necessity. Every decision, every sacrifice, every calculated risk had been made with the same principle: survival by mastery of self. The alien felt an unfamiliar weight pressing against his understanding. These humans were dangerous not because of strength, but because they had survived everything, and they had survived by learning to control themselves in ways no other species had. Memories shifted to conflict. Battles lost and won, yes, but not triumphalist. Each conflict had a lesson, each defeat a seed of strategy. Threxel saw the human mind archive these lessons methodically, preparing successors, adjusting tactics. And in each memory, the commander's presence was apparent, not as a participant necessarily, but as a sentinel, overseeing the careful application of these lessons. Every man, every woman, every human endeavor had contributed to this central intelligence, disciplined and coldly efficient. Then, unexpectedly, Threxel glimpsed the future, or at least projections that Vorn had meticulously calculated. Algorithms, probability matrices, simulations of alien encounters, planetary survival strategies, all converging toward one immutable principle: humanity would not falter. Not out of luck, not out of chance, but because they understood the stakes and themselves. The alien realized, with a sinking awareness, that what he had assumed was impulsive weakness was actually deliberate self-mastery. A subtle shift occurred. Threxel sensed that he had crossed a threshold. No longer a visitor, he was being measured. The commander's mind was not only resisting intrusion, it was evaluating him. Every thought he had entered, every memory he had accessed, had been allowed for inspection. Yes, but under conditions set by Vorn. The human was aware, guiding the perception, filtering the experience, showing exactly what he wished revealed. The alien recoiled inwardly, a reaction foreign and uncomfortable. No species had ever dared to challenge him in this manner. Not with aggression, not with deceit, but with calm, calculated control. Vorn's mind was a weapon, yet it bore no malice in its presentation, only certainty. And yet certainty carried its own threat. The mind reader understood, for the first time, that intelligence disciplined by experience, sharpened by restraint, could be more formidable than raw aggression. Threxel's senses tried to retreat, to withdraw from the immensity of understanding, but the human mind held him in place. It was not coercion, it was awareness. The alien realized that any attempt to manipulate, intimidate, or deceive would fail. He was confronted not by rage, nor by weakness, nor by unpredictability, but by conscious control. And then came the thought that froze him in place entirely. The commander knew that he was being seen, fully and completely, and had allowed it deliberately. Every memory, every strategic insight, every controlled emotion had been selected for effect. Threxel felt the weight of it, the terrifying knowledge that humanity was dangerous because it had learned, suffered, and chosen restraint, not because it lacked capacity for destruction. For the first time in his career, Threxel hesitated. The history of the coalition was built on the certainty that their assessments were infallible. Yet here, in the mind of a single human, that certainty faltered. He withdrew slightly, overwhelmed by the disciplined chaos of human memory and thought. There was a clarity in Vorn's mind, a precision and purpose that suggested a species capable of orchestrating events across generations, capable of surviving threats that would have destroyed any other. The alien's senses strained against an emotion he could barely name. Respect? Awe? Perhaps fear, though not the raw, panicked fear of prey, but the cautious acknowledgement of a predator tamed by wisdom and self-control. Threxel pulled back entirely, disconnecting from the human mind, yet the echo of what he had seen lingered, like a distant storm on the horizon. When he returned to the physical plane, he found the room silent. The human commander had not moved. Elias Vorn stood calmly, his hands behind his back, his expression unreadable. Threxel's bioluminescent veins dimmed slightly, though the pulse of energy beneath them remained erratic. He had expected resistance, confusion, chaos. Instead, he had been shown mastery, discipline, and a terrifying capacity for calculated power. Threxel realized, with a sinking certainty, that the coalition's assessment had been fatally incomplete. Humanity was not a minor species, nor a weak one. It was a species that had survived itself, and in doing so, had become a force that could not be underestimated. And the human before him. Silence settled over the chamber like a tangible weight. Threxel stood frozen, eyes wide and veins pulsing, the bioluminescent glow along his skull flickering with uncertainty. The other members of the coalition shifted uneasily, sensing that something unprecedented had occurred. None spoke, though their collective awareness buzzed with questions. The human commander remained still, composed, hands clasped behind his back, as if the entire display of mental dominance had been merely a courtesy. Threxel's voice, when it came, was quieter than usual, almost reverent. I cannot accurately classify this species, he admitted, though his tone carried the tremor of unaccustomed hesitation. The words themselves were dangerous, unheard of among his kind, who prided themselves on certainty. The council members exchanged glances, the unspoken question hanging in the air. Had the mind reader faltered, or had humanity revealed something truly extraordinary? Commander Vorn inclined his head slightly, acknowledging the statement without celebration. "You have seen enough," he said. The words were even, calm, deliberate. Enough to understand that humanity is not to be underestimated. There was no threat in his tone, only certainty, a quiet assertion of fact. Yet every member of the coalition sensed the subtle force behind it, the weight of experience and control that underpinned his calm. A ripple of tension moved through the alien assembly. For generations, species had relied on the coalition's telepathic evaluations to determine threat levels. Most were predictable, some clever, but none had ever shown the combination of intelligence, restraint, and awareness that the human commander had just displayed. For the first time, the evaluators themselves were uncertain. Threxel took a step back, feeling the unsteady pull of his own pride. "Commander Vorn," he said cautiously, "you allowed me access. You guided what I experienced. That is unprecedented. No species has ever curated their own telepathic impression with such precision." He paused, attempting to regain composure. "It is unnerving." Vorn's gaze did not waver. "I chose what you would see because I understand your methods. I understand how you assess. Humanity survives not because we are the strongest, but because we prepare, because we restrain, and because we learn from every mistake. I do not need to hide our potential. You need to see it to understand it." The room's ambient lights dimmed subtly as the coalition members absorbed the weight of his statement. The implications were profound. Humanity had survived millennia of self-destruction and external threats by mastering its impulses and cataloging every lesson of history. They had evolved beyond instinct and brute force, tempering their power with discipline so precise it rivaled the coalition's own assessments. Threxel's pulse quickened as he realized the truth. Humanity's strength lay not in aggression but in the deliberate mastery of every aspect of its existence. They were unpredictable not because of chaos, but because of foresight. Every action, every restraint, every calculated move had been intended to ensure survival, and now, the human commander stood before them, a living demonstration of that philosophy. A murmur ran through the coalition members. One of the elders, his elongated limbs folding with the grace of predatory calculation, spoke cautiously. "Are you suggesting, mind reader, that our classification of this species has been inadequate?" His tone carried disbelief, but also a trace of apprehension. Threxel nodded slowly, still recovering from the encounter. "Yes. Humanity is not weak. They are not uncontrolled. They are formidable, not by muscle, nor by technological superiority alone, but by deliberate design. Their potential for survival, their capacity for strategy, and their control over themselves exceed any prediction I could have made." Vorn remained silent for a moment, letting the words settle. Then he spoke, each syllable measured and calm. "We do not seek dominance. We do not seek conquest. But we will endure. And we will do so by understanding both ourselves and those we encounter. That is all you need to know. Anything beyond that is a choice we make consciously." The elder's eyes narrowed, scanning the commander for signs of bluff, of exaggeration. But there was none. Every subtle nuance of posture, every controlled inflection, every unflinching gaze conveyed absolute certainty. Humanity had survived its own worst impulses, and now, It had confronted the coalition without aggression, yet with undeniable presence. Threxel felt the unaccustomed twinge of fear, not the panic of prey, but the respect that arises when one recognizes a force capable of destruction, yet restrained. He could no longer rely on certainty. The evaluation had failed. Humanity had exceeded every expectation, and the human commander had just demonstrated why. The elder finally spoke again, carefully choosing words that would not provoke. Perhaps we have misjudged. This species may not be what we assumed. Perhaps we need further observation before any conclusion can be drawn. Vorn inclined his head slightly, acknowledging the concession. Observation is natural, he said. But understand this. Humanity is not naive. You are being observed as much as you are observing. We remember. We calculate. We prepare. That is how we survive. The chamber's energy shifted again, heavier now with respect and apprehension. The coalition had approached the assessment expecting to measure strength, intelligence, and potential threat. Instead, they had encountered mastery of self, deliberate control, and the disciplined foresight of a species that had survived every challenge it had faced. The human commander, calm, measured, and deliberate, had not only represented humanity, he had demonstrated its essence. Threxel withdrew fully from the human mind, his consciousness retreating to the familiar boundaries of his species' perception. Yet the echo remained, like a lingering storm. He was not shaken by weakness, nor overwhelmed by raw power, but by the realization that he had glimpsed a species that chose restraint over chaos, calculation over impulse, and survival over pride. The human commander remained where he had been, hands clasped, posture impeccable, expression unreadable. Yet in that stillness lay the true revelation. Humanity did not need to demonstrate aggression to command respect. They only needed to exist fully aware, fully prepared, and fully restrained. For the first time in Threxel's career, he wondered if any species had ever been truly prepared to meet humanity on equal terms. And the thought left him uneasy, more so than any battlefield or psychic duel ever had. The room held its breath, awaiting the Council's next move, but the balance had already shifted. Humanity had spoken without words, revealed without violence, and left the coalition to confront the reality they had never anticipated. And through it all, Commander Vorn remained calm, as if every ripple of unease, every spark of doubt, every unspoken recognition of fear had been precisely what he intended the aliens to witness. The calm was deliberate, the display complete, the message unambiguous. Humanity survived not by chance, but by design, and the universe would take note. The chamber remained hushed long after Threxel had withdrawn from the commander's mind. The alien assembly, once confident in its evaluations, now shifted in silent deliberation. Whispers that carried neither sound nor direct thought circulated in the collective awareness, subtle tremors of doubt and newfound respect. Humanity, they realized, was no longer merely a species to be observed. It was a presence that demanded reconsideration. Commander Elias Vorn stood with the same calm precision as before, hands behind his back, gaze steady. He made no motion to claim victory, no gesture to assert dominance. He simply existed, an embodiment of the philosophy that had carried humanity through eons of self-inflicted peril and relentless adversity. Each alien mind that attempted to pierce his thoughts recoiled slightly, not from hostility, but from the quiet assurance of control. An elder spoke finally, his tone measured and tentative. "Commander, it seems that our assessment has been insufficient. We anticipated volatility, weakness, unpredictability. Yet what we have observed," he paused, searching for the appropriate descriptor, "suggests a species capable of extraordinary foresight and self-mastery." Vorn inclined his head once, a subtle acknowledgement. Humanity survives not because we are unassailable, nor because we are without flaw. We survive because we learn from every mistake, because we remember every lesson, and because we exercise restraint when it is required. That is our true strength. The elder hesitated, then nodded slowly. The chamber's ambient light shifted, bathing the humans and aliens alike in a neutral hue, one that reflected the recalibration of perception rather than judgment. Then perhaps our previous classification of your species as minor or insignificant was misguided. Perhaps we must consider you differently. Yes, Vorn said, his voice calm, measured, unwavering. Humanity seeks cooperation, not conquest. But we will endure. And we will endure because we understand both ourselves and the consequences of our actions. That is all that need be known. Anything beyond that is a choice we make deliberately. Threxel, still recovering from the intensity of the psychic encounter, observed the subtle acknowledgement in the council. For the first time, he felt not pride in his abilities, but a wary respect. The human mind, disciplined and controlled, had demonstrated a capacity that the coalition had never encountered. It was not aggression that defined their power. It was the calculated restraint that made them unpredictable, formidable, and, ultimately, unassailable in their own terms. The room's attention turned fully to the human commander. Every alien present understood that humanity had been underestimated. Every instinctual assumption about impulsiveness, emotional volatility, or weakness had been proven false. Here was a species that survived by choice, not by chance, by self-mastery, not by blind reaction. And Vorn, as their representative, had made that abundantly clear. "Commander," Threxel finally said, his voice steadying, "I have never encountered a species that can deliberately present itself in such a controlled and instructive manner. Your restraint is not weakness. It is power." Vorn met the alien's gaze, without flinch. Power without discipline is destruction. Humanity has learned this lesson repeatedly. What you perceive as calm is the culmination of millennia of survival, of observation, of choice. Our strength is not in our ability to destroy, but in our ability to endure, to act when necessary, and to control ourselves at all times. The council remained silent, absorbing the weight of his words. They had anticipated threats in the form of weapons, fleets, or raw force. What they had not anticipated was mastery of mind and will, a species that had learned to harness its own potential with ruthless precision. Humanity's reputation had shifted in the space of a single encounter, and the implications were profound. The elder spoke again, cautiously bridging formality and newfound caution. "Then it seems we must reconsider how we engage with your species. Not as a minor power, but as a strategic equal. Perhaps even as a potential ally, if we are deemed trustworthy." Vorn's posture remained unchanged, though a faint hint of acknowledgement passed through his expression. Trust is earned, not demanded. Humanity will engage those who respect reason, foresight, and the consequences of action. Those who fail to do so may learn the lesson by less pleasant means. That is the choice we leave to them. A subtle murmur of awareness passed through the coalition. For generations, they had judged, classified, and directed species according to their assessments. None had ever challenged the coalition's certainty with such deliberate control, such clarity of intent. Humanity had not shouted its power, had not flaunted it with weapons or threat. It had revealed it quietly, undeniably, in the stillness of a mind that had mastered itself and its past. Threxel's bioluminescent veins dimmed, a reflection of internal reconsideration. Respect, he realized, was now a necessary part of evaluation. Fear, in its controlled form, became a prudent acknowledgement rather than a panic. Humanity's capacity for survival, strategy, and restraint demanded recognition. They were no longer a species to watch casually, they were a species to engage with care. Vorn turned slightly, casting his gaze over the assembly, without arrogance. Humanity's story is not one of conquest, nor of submission. It is a story of endurance, of learning, of deliberate action. Our survival depends not on the absence of threats, but on the wisdom to navigate them. That is the reality we offer to the universe. The room fell into contemplative silence. The alien assembly, long accustomed to certainty, now confronted ambiguity, and in that ambiguity, the presence of a species that had mastered itself. Humanity had spoken without violence, revealed without threat, and yet demonstrated a force that demanded recognition. As the chamber's lights shifted back to neutral, the council slowly rose to their full height. Decisions would follow, alliances considered, strategies revised, and assumptions overturned. Yet in the midst of all this, the human commander remained the same, calm, measured, and deliberate. The lesson had been delivered quietly, but with absolute clarity. Humanity did not need to prove its power. It only needed to exist fully aware, fully prepared, and fully restrained. And in that restraint lay the final, undeniable truth. A species that had mastered itself was a species the universe could neither ignore nor underestimate. Humanity had finally been seen, not as weak, not as volatile, not as minor, but as what it had always been, formidable, disciplined, and unyielding. The chamber exhaled a collective understanding. The human commander straightened, adjusted his stance, and stepped back slightly, leaving the council to absorb the reality he had quietly imposed. The message was complete. The demonstration had ended. And yet, the resonance of what had been revealed would echo through the coalition for generations to come. Humanity had been understood. Humanity had been respected. And in that understanding, it had claimed a place not through aggression, but through the disciplined mastery that defined its very essence.